Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Ember Prime Gloom build. Now Gloom is the ability that we're subsuming on from Sevagoth from the Call of Tempestarii update. We're going to be dropping it over Ember's 1, as her 1 is just a fireball that doesn't really do that much, whereas her other abilities, her 2, Immolation, gives her damage reduction as well as her heat meter. Her 3, Fire Blast, can do AoE armor strip as well as staggering enemies. Now we'll be using this conjunctively with Gloom so that we can get that increased stun time just like the Savage Silence setup I showed you 2 days ago. Finally, we have Inferno, and this is going to be super helpful. We won't be casting it that often, but at the start of every single run, it will be used to fuel her passive, where you get an extra 5% strength per enemy engulfed in flames. This means you don't need to mod as much strength on the build to cap out the Gloom for the max slow percent. So let's take a look at the Gloom. Now, first thing you'll notice is these are values from before the hotfix. So the biggest thing that changed is it went from 5 to 10 drain to 0.75 per enemy up to 1.5 capped out at 10 enemy drain, which is 15, which makes energy management even more important on the build. Immolation will be handy to keep you alive as well as fueling her Fire Blast so you can eventually get a 100% armor strip. Now we will be able to reach the 95% slow cap with Inferno interacting with her passive. So let's take a look at this build. The funniest thing about this build is it actually only works on Steel Path. You need the enemies to survive your cast of Inferno so that you fuel your passive, because if they die, you won't get that extra strength increase. So I have 2 variants on this build, the version with Arcane Energize as well as one without it that uses Pax Bolt. Now, as I stated with the changes to Gloom, it makes it a little bit harder to manage if we run a high range setup since the max drain is higher than before. As usual, I have a brief respite and rolling guard setup since shield gating is a form of damage negation, and as we all know, damage negation is always better than damage reduction. Now you'll also be running Prime Flow because the energy drain is pretty high in this build and you'll get more out of it than running Streamline, as you will be able to top up with Energize. We do want to be piling on range so we can get the most out of Gloom, slowing down as much enemies as possible so they never get a chance to shoot at you, and this will also fuel into her Fire Blast where you have a much larger radius of armor strip and CC knockdown stun. This will also help our Inferno cover a larger area, which means you will hit more enemies to fuel her passive when you first try to charge up Gloom. Because of her passive, we can afford to only run 199 strength, so I'm doing this with Transient Fortitude and Umbral Intensify. The little bit of a duration hit is okay on this setup because we do have Energize to counteract the active drain of Gloom. Now her Immolation only drains energy if your heat meter is at 100% maxed out, so you do want to keep an eye on that, as it does get pretty hard to maintain on the setup if both of them max out. Now with the changes to Gloom, if you're still worried about the energy economy, I would recommend slotting Preparation over Cunning Drift. You'll only lose 2 meters on your radius, down from 30 to 28 on the Gloom, while having an immediately accessible full energy pool. I don't have a rank 8 Preparation, but this is what you want to use. You'll cast your 4 first, and then your 3 to CC them so you have a little bit of extra time. Now you can cast your 1. I'm just going to show you here. We got a 40% strength bonus out of tagging 8 enemies here. Honestly, you're probably going to hit more in Steel Path. You can see I'm already at an 83% slow, up from 69. This is already extremely effective as is, despite not reaching the slow cap. And now you can just cast your 2 to get your heat meter going, as well as giving yourself a little bit of damage reduction. Once you do cap out your bar, you can cast your 3 for an AoE 100% armor strip, which is another reason why we built so much for range. Of course, it's still useful even if your Fire Blast hasn't reached 100% strip yet, so feel free to use it as needed. You should also be bringing a well-built melee, as it should still be able to kill enemies even if you don't cast Fire Blast on them, although that does make the killing process easier. Now let's take a look at a second build. What happens if you don't have Arcane Energize? Well, there is actually a way to make this build work. However, I strongly would not recommend using this in solo runs at this point. All we're doing is dropping Umbral Intensify for Streamline. But as the maximum possible drain increased up to technically 15 from the hotfix, I would only recommend using this build in a team or if you somehow have another source of energy income. Slotting in 190 efficiency for the drain calculations means we're going to have to cut corners somewhere else. We do have our drain down to 2.5 here, which is equivalent to 0.38 per enemy with the hotfix. This means it would cap out at 3.8 energy used per second. I felt like this build was barely breaking even on solo before, and now with the higher max drain, it probably isn't sustainable. Now to maintain the same amount of slow, we have to cut off Cunning Drift, which at this point honestly extra range doesn't matter as much. You're only dropping down to 28 meters. Power Drift puts you back up to 170 from 155, where Pax Bolt will let you hit 200% just like the first build. For our Arcanes, just like the first build, we're still going to be running Arcane Aegis so that you can possibly regenerate your shields as needed. Whereas the second mod, it can be whatever you want, maybe Arcane Fury to strengthen your melee more, or Arcane Acceleration if you want to use your rifle, or Pistolier for another headshot pistol, or anything else, like Strike for more attack speed or Guardian for survivability. There's a lot of flexibility here. Now I did mention Pax Bolt. What exactly is Pax Bolt? Well, Pax Bolt is a kit gun arcane. Because on Steel Path you're probably going to be using a pistol primer with a melee, we're going to be using a primary kit gun. This is a standard build with Hunter's Munitions and Viral so that we can kill things off, as Pax Bolt only triggers on headshot kills. So you do want something that hits hard and hits fast. As the energy economy on this build is stressed even more with the hotfix, I actually would recommend just not even running Power Drift and slotting in Preparation instead, so you can once again start casting from the get-go. Just like before, I cast my Inferno, but this time I'm actually going to have to shoot them in the head to get a kill off first. Now let's take a look at my ability. I have an 82% slow. So this is how you match the first build despite not having Energize, meaning you have to slot in Streamline. So the actual flow is pretty much the same. Cast your 4, shoot ahead, cast your 1, and then cast your 2 as needed. Feel free to build up your combo immediately, as now they're harmless. Now another vital part of this build would be the companion you choose to bring along. I just want an excuse to bring along my Nautilus, as I find it looks nice and I haven't much reason to take it out in a while. You have your Synth Fiber set to improve the set bonus and reload your holstered weapons, fired up because it actually does scale really well for this weapon. Cordon for a little bit of CC. But the big fun of this party is its Verglass weapon, which works basically as a Glaxon. It instantly primes it up with 10 viral stacks and a shit ton of heat procs. Alternatively, you can run a Panzer Vulpaphyla for some AoE viral. This is probably the better option if you're looking for longevity, since it pretty much can't die and has better AoE status application, whereas your Verglass is only good at killing enemies that you can't outright deal with. So just to show you what this looks like, Verglass doesn't really change the playstyle at all, but you will notice it is targeting single enemies pretty quickly and it can kill them alone, while actually already priming them up for condition overload if they're a bit beefier and you haven't managed to kill them yet. The remaining footage in this video are just clips from Steel Path Void. This first build is the one without Arcane Energize, but this is also pre-patch, so I would not recommend doing this solo again. This is only for team play. The only solo build that is now viable is the Arcane Energize setup. Once you shoot the head and you cast your 1, your entire goal will be to keep it up for the rest of your entire mission, as you want to preserve your 95% slow, since this is where most of your survivability comes from. You can occasionally CC enemies with Fire Blast as needed, to armor strip if you're capped out on your bar. When the Acolytes spawn, they do get affected by the 95% slow. Unfortunately, Fire Blast cannot armor strip them, but they're pretty much harmless since they can't attack or move away. This second set of clips is on the build with Arcane Energize. You'll see it's a lot easier to run with. I don't need to shoot headshots with my Parthia to trigger Pax Bolt. I immediately have a 95% drain. Energize pretty much recovers more energy than I burn. And this also gives me more freedom to cast my 3 a bit more liberally, as well as casting my 4 as needed if I want to reach 90% faster. Now when the Acolyte spawns, it's just the same as before, except you're even less likely having to worry about your energy since you do actually have Energize sustaining it. The slow in a couple of swings is all you need, and then you can just watch the Acolyte die to the slash. I feel like Gloom on Ember significantly improves their survivability, however the energy drain is still pretty high, and with the hotfix on a high range build becomes even harder to sustain than before. It does make her pretty fun to play, but doesn't completely change her playstyle and doesn't make her that broken either. It is a fun little spin, and I would recommend you at least trying it out. That's it for what I wanted to show you today. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like, or better yet, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 75.8% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get out all the information as I can from Tempestarii updates, as well as hotfixes, as well as any relevant build guides or further helmets I might come up with down the road, so you won't want to miss out. That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.